Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Freedom Finances family. This is the Freedom Finances Show. We're on episode 14. Today is, well, now it's actually Friday. So we're going to go over a few things. We've had a slight delay this week, so thank you for your patience if you were looking forward to our weekly shows. So just to start us off, what our topic today we're going to be going over is handling finances and budgets in today's world. That's our overall topic, so we're going to do that in a moment. But for this upcoming episode to start with, so our last episode we had a little competition. So we're going to
The smile on Nick's face is ridiculous.
I'm excited for this.
He couldn't hold it. He couldn't hold it in. So stock market's been up and down recently, so you'll know at least where we stand as a team. And we'll go over that in a little bit. Also, before that, I don't want to always start us off with a little icebreaker. So I want to start us off with what went well during your week. So let Bradley, you go first this time.
Well, same as Nick, but I was deathly sick last week. And it was like one of the worst sicknesses I've ever had. And like I'm like at 95%. My ears are still a little clogged. But this week was mostly pretty good. I could live normal. Last week it was like I basically lost the week last week. I don't really remember what happened or what I did, but I feel a lot better. So that's, this was a great week.
It was like that trip from Vegas, Nick, what about you?
Well, just like Bradley, I was also sick, and I am better now. But in a little bit of a different news, my daughter turns 18 tomorrow. So
wow,
we're having a little weekend birthday celebration for her. So
that's so weird.
Yeah, that is so weird. For everyone to know, Nick, how old are you?
I'm 35.
All right, yeah. Skip that education course. All right, so for me, quick update. So I have nothing too crazy in my life. I have not been sick because I'm responsible and take vitamin C every day.
Right.
Part of my new vitamin. Well, it is. So I have vitamin course I take every morning. Oh, okay. So I have like a new vitamin course I take because of my workouts. I've still been consistently doing that. And in the past, I think so, I'm about to hit my 2 months going to the gym, doing boxing, and I'm about to hit under 230. So that's pretty exciting.
Nice.
So I'm excited for that.
Nick, did you get your diploma yet?
Say again?
Did you get your diploma yet?
Not the physical copy, but I did just get enrolled for the master's class.
Nice.
Starting April 7th. So
that's awesome.
Nice. That's so weird, right? Wait, shouldn't you get that first in the mail or something? I feel like that's the biggest part about it.
It takes a while to get there.
Okay.
It's the same school, so they know I'm getting it. So.
But like you can if you're going for a position.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You can get the transcript and make sure hey, I have completed this.
Yes.
Okay, cool. My most thing I've got a certificate is a new plan about my weight goals, so that's about it. So it's not as fascinating as a degree. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else on there, the next thing we're going to talk about is the investment draft update. So there's our first update after we took a little bit of a break. Gentlemen, do you have the numbers in front of you of where you were?
I don't. No.
Okay, I got you. No problem. Okay, I got it. Just didn't know if you wanted to do it because
no, you're good.
I just want to do it. So we'll actually start off with Bradley. Bradley, overall, you're down $3,541.43. Your biggest loser was Tesla. Biggest winner was Berkshire Fund. Nick, down $2,899.76. So far, technically, you're losing the least. Congratulations.
Which makes me the winner.
You're right.
So far, yeah. So your biggest loser, Bitcoin. Biggest winner, T-Mobile. So let's go off with Nick first. Why do you feel like Bitcoin's down so much now? Do you hear any trends, news? What do you got?
Yeah, so I think anything's just going to be a kind of gut guess. I wouldn't say there's any quantifiable data that says it, but I think as you see the markets go down, the fear index goes up, people get a little bit more, hesitant on certain investments, and I think Bitcoin is risky, so people are going to want to sell and get out of that investment because they're afraid it's going to drop. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think we bounced back on like 78,000, so maybe there's some resistance there. But yeah, I think as it once the market starts going back up, I think Bitcoin will probably rebound again. But I think people are just a little scared, and Bitcoin's going to be one of those first things to go.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin. Sorry, what I was going to say is Bitcoin isn't like a stock where it has like revenues, to go off of. It's just kind of like personal sentiment. So when it's like this weird, like this weird slide that continues, like I sell a little, so Dylan sells a little bit more, and Nick sees that two people sold, so he sells, and then eventually it gets down to $78,000, and someone's like, well, now it's on sale, let me buy some, which Nick was saying it's resistant. So it's so volatile that like this could happen. Like next week, Nick could be at 110,000 with Bitcoin, and the week after back at 85,000. So
we're so back. We never left. Bradley, you kind of took the question and answered what I was going to ask anyway, so thank you for that. So Bradley, biggest loser Tesla. Any news as to why? Gut check reasons? What do you feel?
Well, Tesla was a big loser. So were a lot of like these stocks that were on the S&P 500. So Tesla, Google, Nvidia, Meta, like basically anything that's in the top 10 to top 15 of the S&P, all were big losers. Tesla has a very high beta. It's at 2.35, so it's pretty volatile. So the market had a pretty difficult week, and Tesla at a 2.34 beta means if the market is down 10%, it's going to be down 23.4%. So it kind of follows the market at a double rate than everything else. So and it's very volatile because Tesla's quarterly profits are very revenue based and future based of what's happening. And I don't like, people point to political things with Tesla, and I don't buy it at all, because you can take a look every quarter when there's a new revenue report to their shareholders. There's always either a quick spike or a quick decline. And it kind of follows that pattern for a few weeks. So, like, regardless of what you think about politics and Elon Musk or Trump or whatever, Tesla doesn't follow politics. Money doesn't follow politics. Politics may follow money, but money doesn't follow politics. You're not going to change your 401k, or at least you shouldn't, based on politicians. But, other way around, politicians may mess around with their 401ks based on money. Nick and I even talked about that, like tracking politicians' investments, and like, hey, you can just follow, like, Rick Scott and Nancy Pelosi were like top 1 and 2, I think. So anyways, the S&P is down, and that's a big piece of why Tesla's down, and it has a really high beta.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see probably after this podcast comes out, you'll probably see the S&P rise after, and then you'll see stocks to follow. I agree with you. I don't think unless Elon Musk runs around naked and like blows everything up, I don't think there's a real chance Tesla is like gonna, stock's gonna drop, because it's silly. All right, so with that being said, we're going to meat and potatoes on here, which once again, handling finances and budgets in today's world is our topics. So, Bradley, kick it off with you on there, just because you're last to speak. With the world, it's not just America, for our American audience, but the world itself is going through a lot of inflation in general. Mm-hmm. So first, for people, obviously everyone hears inflation, they may not know exactly what that is. So first, give us a roundabout of what inflation is, and why is the world experiencing it now?
Yeah, so I think of inflation in two ways, like the prices of your normal stuff like groceries, the prices going up. And then if you think about investing in finances, the prices of the stock market are really high right now. And I think Nick talked about this a couple weeks ago, how like the stock market's kind of slowly been going up and it's a little inflated right now. But if you look at the prices of groceries, eggs, for example, everyone knows that eggs are really expensive right now. You have to understand both what's going on in the world and what's going on in like local economic policy. I don't know if either of you know this, but there's been, I think, something like 50 million chickens that were killed. I think hens that were killed since December, and no one knows why. Well, you should know once you hear that number why egg prices are going up. But if you don't know that, like, you may point blame in a certain way. You may say this person's fault. This person's at fault with inflation, but it's because of avian flu scares. Like, people are afraid of the avian flu and chickens spreading the avian flu. So they culled something like 50 million chickens in the last 3 months, and egg prices have skyrocketed.
The legitimate reason, right? Was they culled because of the avian flu? Like, that was the reason, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real question.
No, it's okay.
You hear a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like, but I mean, like, if you look at things like through social media or the media itself, like, they won't point to the actual reasons of why that certain thing is inflationary. And throughout the last 3 or 4 years, inflation was skyrocketing in 2021 and 2022, and it kind of slowed down to 3-4. Now, I think last report is around 3% over a 12-year period. So it's slowed down. The Federal Reserve's goal is 2%. Over a 12-year period. Right now it's at 3%. So like, understanding like the price of groceries and the price of the stock market are two separate things in my mind. And you should base your budget not based on the price of the stock market, but based on the price of groceries.
Makes sense. There's a lot of debate going on where if you throw money at it, but then like money can cause inflation to go worse. There's a lot of different angles you can do it, but I'm going to throw this scenario at you, Nick. Let's say pay isn't increasing over time. I don't know the full scope of that at this point, but if pay isn't increasing, how do you handle your investments if in your shoes, right? How would you handle that? How do you reduce your investing until prices can come down and pay will increase to follow?
Yeah, I think that it kind of depends on what your investment strategy is. If you're looking for retirement type stuff, I think you just slow roll it. You continue to, reinvest dividends and kind of just ride out the market. I think that when you're looking at the price, to Bradley's point with inflation and stuff, I think there's a lot of different components to it. I think some of it's supply and demand, and I think inflation doesn't like raise equally, right? So the cost of one thing will go up, and then people will need to pay workers more to be competitive. So it kind of has a little bit of a out of order operations with inflation, I think. Yeah. And, I think if you find yourself on the side of inflation that everything's going up except your pay, which I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation. I think there's, a couple different tactics. I mean, one, maybe you need to look for a way to increase your pay. Maybe you do need to look at different, career paths and different avenues, make yourself more marketable and things like that. But I think that, you got to stick with the basic stuff. You got to reduce your expenditures, right? You got to pay down high interest debt, things like that to kind of keep yourself protected. And then as far as investments go, if you've got to reduce it a little bit, I get that. I would try not to stop it though. I think when you stop 100%. Investing, you get out of the habit, and then like, when do you start? It's kind of like, when's the right time to have a baby? Well, it's never the right time, but it's like investing. It's like, it's never going to be the right time. So if you're already in the habit, keep it going, just reduce it, but if you got a monthly rotation or something like that you're investing, try not to stop that if at all possible. And if you do have to pause it or something like that, have a set, like, hey, here's when I get back into it. Here's the number, the date, whatever that might be, and get back as quick as you can. Because I think it's not timing the market, it's time in the market that will help you increase your investments. And so you can't, I think I made that mistake this last maybe 3 or 4 months, kind of being out of the market, and I missed out on a lot of increase because of that. So I think the more you can stay in the market and continue to invest, you'll be better off in the long run.
Yeah, two things to that. One, I agree. Something even with some personal like job changes I've experienced recently, I still maintained a $200 personal investment into my stock portfolio each month, going into different avenues, and I maintain that regardless. Now, some months I may increase it, but I never go below that. I want to make sure that's maintained and it keeps going
Yeah.
because it's always the version of yourself 30 years down the line will thank you of your version
Yeah.
now, is how I
Yeah.
look at it. As well, the other half of that too, I agree with you completely. Something I tell people that I help develop is two things with their lives if you're not happy. First, identify the problem. Like, what are you truly not happy? Is it truly that you just have to take it to a call center experience? You have to offer something now, right? Is it something with your job that, like, your job title changed in some way? Something added? Identify it. Once you identify it, how are you going to make a change in your life that'll benefit you? So for you, Nick, like you mentioned, market yourself better, find a different avenue. It doesn't help
Yeah.
to just say I hate this. Have a goal and have an objective to get to. That's always my advice to everybody. Makes your life easier and better.
Yeah. And with going back to like your initial point, Nick, the only time you should really stop that investment is if it's like a huge life event where you can't afford to put money into a certain thing, right? Like if there's two people who are both working full time, one person loses their job and like you have to cut back your budget $2,000, if you have to spend money on your credit cards to continue investing, then maybe slow down your investing and make sure you don't spend money on your credit cards. But that's like an extreme scenario of when you should actually stop. Because like you said, and I've done this before too, is like once you lower your number, you get more comfortable with more money in your budget. And you're like, well, maybe I can't afford that extra $100 a paycheck because I've stopped spending it on, or I've started allocating it to a different place. So it's always difficult to go backwards unless you have to in an emergency.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I've heard kind of they adjust their lifestyle based off their income, and so as you do get more of that income coming in, you just, unintentionally kind of increase that lifestyle,
Yeah.
and then you still don't have the extra to kind of
Right.
you stock away. So live below your means maybe would be the best advice on something like that.
Weird. Don't spend more than you make. Crazy. New credit cards for everybody. So, speaking of volatility, I think we can all agree, once again, obviously, as we have gone through our stock market investment draft, it went down. And I bet, once again, once this video comes up, you'll see the market increase as well. S&P will probably go back up. So, Bradley, market volatility, right?
Yeah.
Should it be considered when investing or budgeting? For example, if like the market's on a long-term hot streak, think COVID time, game stonk, right? The whole nine, or a crash.
Yeah.
Should it change the way you think about budgeting? Should you adjust? What shouldn't you adjust? What do you think?
I would say the only thing it should change is if there are massive economic worldwide crashes. So, for example, the housing crash of 2008, a lot of people, like, we look at it as a past thing where it's like there were people who overspent on homes. There were politicians who pushed people buying homes. There were bankers who pushed people who couldn't afford to buy homes. Like, everyone was kind of at fault, but we look back at it like it was this old historical event, but there were people, like, there were companies that closed, there were banks that closed, which means your investments don't just go down. If you had an investment in a certain thing that closed, it was zero. It's now zero. So unless that happens, and if that happens, you're kind of screwed. Unless that happens, you just need to like live your life like normal. Like I don't even recommend most people even look at the stock market regularly unless you're trying to educate yourself, right? But if you're looking at it to every day to say like, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? The answer is probably yes. Just yes, invest money now and then leave it alone and don't worry about it. I lost most of my money. Most of the money that I did lose in the stock market was because I was looking at it and trying to say this is a good time to get in, this is a good time to pull out. And then my percentages skyrocketed once it went out. So and then COVID was another time when there were a lot of the stock market dipped, but it goes up, right? Small companies go up the highest, then large companies, large stocks go up, but the stock market pretty much always goes up. Like we always say, you can't tell the future. Well, no, you're right. But I do know that in a few months, the stock market's probably going to go up, right? I don't necessarily know what stocks are, but I know it's probably going to go up. So you shouldn't really change your budget much unless there's an economic crash. So there's nothing going on in the world that at least that we know of that's going to cause an economic crash, even though the stock market was down this week. So my recommendation is just leave it be, let it alone. If anything, the stock market's down, maybe throw an extra $100 in if you have it, and then let it be. Don't pull out now unless you have to. Just leave it be, ignore it. That's my recommendation.
And if you're in I don't know, you always the term is invest when it's low, so maybe you do get a
Sure.
a little rebound off that, right?
Yeah.
But I prefer investing in the things that usually have to follow the economy, so those things are less volatile in general.
Yeah.
Now, Nick, so regardless of budgeting, so moving on from that for a moment here, the stock market, I know you've kind of talked about it, but do you feel like we should be worried about it? What's next, do you feel, and what's your vibes on it now?
Yeah, I think I shared kind of the price to earning ratio was high, and that there was some correction that was due. I think that's all we're seeing. I don't think we're seeing any sort of crash or anything like that. I think things were expensive. You've got a lot of people who are going to take profits, and that when there's more sellers than buyers, that's going to move the market, obviously. And I think when the people see and institutions see that the price per share is higher than it should be, yeah, we're going to see a correction. I think it's natural. This one, I mean, it hurt. I mean, it's been 5-6 days in a row of just kind of decreasing, and it's tough. But I've seen it where the following day it might bounce right back up. There's going to be, I think you said it, Dylan. Somebody is going to say, "Hey, this looks like it's on sale. I'm going to buy it." And when more people decide to do that, then the market's just going to go back up.
Right.
There's nothing, to Bradley's point, that is saying here's an event or something that is causing some sort of a massive, fear. I think the market's just a little overpriced right now. We're going to see a little correction. Maybe it lasts for a little bit longer, but I'm kind of with Bradley. I think it's going to bounce back up probably within a week or two, would be my guess. And whether that's a sharp bounce or just kind of slowly going back up, that's hard to say, but there's always going to be a buyer at some price.
I think that part of the correction, Nick, could also be slower growth than it has been. I'm looking at the S&P over the last 5 years. It's up 101.56%, which, doing some quick napkin math, that's about 20% a year, right? So that's higher than what the average is historically over the last 120 years or so. It's around 11.5%, I think, since 1900. So it's been growing at a 20% rate when historically it grows at an 11.5% rate. So that price to earning ratio may just mean, the correction may just mean, maybe we only get 6 to 10% growth over the next year or two. And that's how it corrects itself. And it doesn't necessarily have to go down to correct itself. It could just grow at a slower pace, which could be fine if inflation grows at a higher pace. Well, then you could just subtract that inflation off of it, the price of groceries off of it, and just know that hopefully in 10 years from now, let's say this 5 years it grows at 101%, which is 20%. And then the next 5 years, it only grows 50%. So then it's back to its normal rate over 10-year period.
So I have a question because I like to read the news. And I hear there's a potential with the amount that the stock market has dropped and the amount of revenue that companies are increasing. A lot of big words. Potential for a recession to actually hit the United States finally within the next quarter has been thrown around a couple of times I've seen. So This is open to either one of you want to take it. So
Yeah.
my question would be first, identify what a recession actually is, and then if you feel like we're actually going to get into one.
So I think that you have to bring in the labor market to really understand a recession. And like, is there going to be a recession? There could be, but there has to be inflation or potentially deflation. In this case, it would be inflation plus a poor labor market. And the labor market over the last 5 years has kind of sucked in general since COVID, right? Like a bunch of people quit, and then the companies hired a bunch of people, and then the hiring was too high, so companies attrited a bunch of people. They churned a lot of people. The job market has just been extremely unstable, and it's kind of slowly stabilizing a little bit. For a recession to actually happen, I think you have to see a very bad job market. And right now, I don't know the exact unemployment rate. It's not good, but it's okay. And that's my opinion of what we would have to see a recession is bad job market and some insane volatility in the stock market, whether it's a crazy crash in prices or even higher inflation.
So,
what do you think, Nick?
Sorry,
go ahead.
Just to clarify first, recession is needing to be both inflation and an unemployment drop off, correct?
I think it has to be prices and the labor market. You can't just have one or the other, because if the stock market goes down but everyone's still employed, okay, so what, But if companies start laying people off, that's when it gets difficult.
Back to you, Nick.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny because weren't they changing the definition of a recession for a while because we were in one, but nobody wanted to admit we were in one. But what
a little
I think
background, yes, essentially,
yeah. But what is it? Every 10 years, there's some sort of recession, I think. And if you count COVID as a recession, then we're kind of still in the middle, right? We still got a little ways, I think, before we're due one. And I think to Bradley's point, I think we're getting smarter as an economy where we're looking out for those types of things and trying to get ahead of it. And so maybe the recessions, when they do come, aren't as bad. But yeah, I do think you got to see a combination of some things, because every recession has kind of had like a fuse, a spark that kind of got us into that place. And so, yeah, I think you do got to see some, high unemployment numbers. Inflation's got to be going high. Like there's got to be a couple different things, kind of perfect storm. I think we got a little ways ahead of us before we see something like that again.
Yeah, to your point, Nick, like when they changed the definition, do either of you know what the Psalms rule is?
No.
Okay, so it's like an economic theory that if the rolling, and I might screw this up, but if 3 months of unemployment, January, February, March is higher than the last 12 months of rolling unemployment, then you've hit a recession before you knew it. So this Psalms rule technically happened like mid last year, around August or September, and our unemployment was higher in mid to late 2024 than it was over the last 12 years. So that theory would be like, yes, it kicks in, we're in a recession and we didn't even know it. But the problem was unemployment wasn't great for like a 3 or 4 month stretch, but no one really felt it that much, of course, unless you were unemployed. And it was just kind of like an uncomfortable economy. So like a true recession, maybe Nick's right. Maybe maybe we hit a mini recession and we didn't if you were in it, you knew it, right? Like if you didn't have a job, if you're struggling to pay your bills, you knew it. But no one really talked about it. It wasn't that bad. Prices were pretty high. Inflation sucked the last year, near the end of the year, and you could see it with the stock market as well. So maybe it did happen a little bit, to your point, Nick.
Well, and I think if you remember back in 2008, I remember hearing that we were in a recession, and I remember having to Google how would you know we're in a recession? It was like, well, if you have a job and you're like, you're probably not feeling anything. And so I remember being in the middle of a recession, like I feel the same. There's nothing different for me, but I still had employment, so
I would
agree.
honestly say like a difference at looking back, and I mean I wasn't in the labor market in '08, but it felt like this is like the opposite a little bit of like the jobs loss. Like it feels like a tech market, like job market layoffs are more happening like the labor, like your carpentries or your building buildings. I can't word. And like before in '08, it felt like that, like equating to like the housing market, right?
Yeah.
Now we had a COVID boom of tech. Everyone wanted to go virtual. It had a lot of tech companies hiring for those roles. Now it's not needed. There's a lot of going back to the office now is a big push. So it kind of feels like a different style of job.
Almost like a .com bubble burst again in a different way.
That's a way to look at it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
I think like the technology is changing. Introduction of AI. People are evaluating their revenues. Companies are evaluating their revenues differently, and inflation is going up. So the cost of the prices to import things, the prices to do business is increasing, and the only way to truly avoid any hurt is to increase wages, and wages have not increased as quickly as the labor or as quickly as inflation has increased. So that's why we feel like over the last 3 years, like the labor market's been pretty uneven, inflation's been decently high, but our wages haven't gone up. And that's why it's like you say, like the technology industry is so volatile when it comes to the labor market. Like we talk about Bitcoin being volatile, like working at like Google or Meta or Tesla or any tech company is volatile. You don't know what's going to happen, whether you're going to have a job or not.
Yeah, like it was, I think on Tuesday, Warner Bros, like their video game section, they laid off 3 whole studios off of there. Yeah, so if you ever played like Shadows of Mordor, people out there, like the Monolith Games department, that got axed completely. They're gone. And 2 other ones I'm not too familiar with, so sorry if anyone's out there that's watching and you got laid off from that. But like the other 2 that got put on there was also part of the group that made that Multiversus game, like the Smash Bros clone. And they actually equated it to the Suicide Squad game just failing. And that was around $200 million to make. So 2 things with the tech world, it's more expensive to make things. And if that investment's not there, that's where you're seeing a lot of these wings of these companies just being axed completely. It's crazy. And it's sad. You know, I have a soft spot for all employees in the world, and I hope that all of them find jobs in whatever field they want to go to that makes them more successful. Like we really do. But yeah, unless anyone has further talks on if we're recession or thoughts on there, we'll move on to the next part.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So, Bradley, back to you. So we've kind of touched on this piece a little bit too, but with the stock market having such strong years, I think there was like a blip in 2020 rather, since 2008. When do you feel like this kind of like high end? So we're kind of seeing it now a little bit, right? Like we're seeing some ups and downs. Nick, you also mentioned that where you're going to see that pullback. And also, how does this affect our 401ks too? So where are we going here?
So, so the only way it's really going to impact your 401k is if you retire or pull out money, but let's just assume you're not pulling out money. You're just leaving your money there. If you're retiring when it's at a low, then it stings a lot, right? So let's say you're going to retire within the next 3 years, and I'm just making up a hypothetical, but we have a 3-year recession and you retire in 3 years, and so your portfolio's down 25%. That's going to sting. If you retire in 20 years, then that 20% loss is going to be made up. So your 401k, unless you pull out your money when it's low, which means you're losing money, it shouldn't matter. What I think is going to happen with the stock market is that it's going to going to continue to grow. And like Nick said, we're probably looking at a correction, but I don't necessarily think that there has to be a downward trend, maybe just a slower trend. Like the slope is lower than it was before, but it still goes up, just not as high. That's my overall thought of what's going to happen. And really what you should be thinking if you're working, if you're investing money into a 401k, is this only impacts me if I retire during a recession period, or if there's a major economic crisis, like the last one was 2008, where banks closed, companies closed, and people didn't just lose a percentage of their money, a lot of their money went to zero. So unless that happens, don't worry about it. If you're going to retire during a recession, you can work longer, right? That's the other option. And it's kind of like it sounds brutal, but like if it's a recession and you feel like your 401k is not great, keep working, work through the recession, wait for the bump, then retire, and then start pulling out your money.
Do you feel like you should go like a full-time keep it, or do you feel like maybe go to part-time in the meantime? What do you feel?
I mean, it depends.
Kind of like situation, right?
So let's say we're at 2000 COVID times, right? And you're 66 years old, and you want to retire, and your stock, there's no way to put it other than your stock portfolio went down, your 401k went down. So it went down in around December, January of 2020, and it was back up to December levels by July. So maybe just keep working for 6 months. If there's an economic crisis, you're probably going to have to keep working for a few more years, but work full time for a couple more months. You'll see your money and you'll be like, okay, everything's calm. I'm chill. It's all right. I hope that answers that.
Good enough.
To play devil's advocate on that one, I think they say the average recession lasts, 18 months? And so, because you've also got not just people who are starting retirement, but people who are already in retirement when something like this happens. Do you guys know the 4% rule with your retirement?
Yep. Yeah, take out 4% every year and it grows, makes up.
Yeah. You'll never lose. You'll never run out, basically. And so I think, if you did want to retire or find yourself in a position where you're already retired, I think you adjust what you're taking out. Maybe you do have to change your lifestyle a little bit, but if you stay consistent with your plan and take your 4%, you shouldn't really hit a whole lot of your principal balance of that. And then, on average, you got to wait it out 18 months, but probably on the longer end, that will grow again. And that 4% that you're willing to or able to take out will be larger. But maybe you do just have a little bit of a less and, set yourself up for retirement, have less debt, things like that. And you live off a little bit less,
Yeah.
I agree. I think something that's like a common theme that we're trying to make sure everyone recognizes is budget correctly. Don't stop thinking about your future, because at the end of the day, we all want the freedom to just be able to live our lives once we retire. There's going to be situations and things that like hurdles that come in our way, but don't stop doing the basics that you're going to be thankful for 30 years down the line. I think it's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that kind of goes with your point, Dylan, with what Nick was saying is like, if you prep more than just a 401k, but get rid of debt, budget well, and like a recession might not hurt as much when you're retired. Obviously if you have less money, there's nothing you can do but work. Unless you can afford to stay retired. But if you've done things the right way, start earlier, the better. Start your budget now, in that way you reduce your debt now, so that way you can have better investments now. So 10, 20, 30 years, when there is inevitably a recession, it doesn't hurt as much.
Couple things to that I would stress for everybody on the freedomfinances.org website. We do have both the beginning budget calculator. We also have a debt calculator you can utilize as well. Even for people that may be farther along, we have an advanced wealth building plan. These are all tools that we provide for free on the website that can help you, that these two put a lot of effort into making and putting together, along with all of our free resources please take the time. Even if you think you know what every little bit you have, take the time to please do so. You're going to thank yourself and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I knew exactly where I was, or not, because Netflix adds up and I'm pretty sure they increased the price again.
Yeah, they definitely did. Did you guys
Yeah.
know that they sneakily took away 4K? Like, they didn't take it away, they just made it another tier. Because I used to have, like, you can hit the 4K button and watch 4K. Now, it's like, hey, do you want to upgrade to 4K? And I'm like, I used to have 4K. Now it's another pricing tier. So while they didn't necessarily raise the price, it was a mini price increase without even knowing it. That drives me nuts.
Can you even tell the difference?
I can. So
You shouldn't have brought that up.
yeah,
Oh man.
I can.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's I'm a little passionate about it. I have my almost 600 movie selection. Like I have Blu-rays, 4Ks. So yes, it's something that I do notice.
That is something that Bradley and I very much. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. That is something that Bradley and I are very passionate about. As you can
Yes.
tell, I do have my own physical
Yes.
media collection
Mhm.
over there, and some off-screen you can't see. Yeah, that's crazy. You're right. That increased sometime last year, like mid, and it's like $25 to do that a month. That's wild.
Yeah.
Fun
Huh.
fact: if you're just trying to watch Lord of the Rings, you can get it for within 2 months of that cost, and you'll always have it if you have it on disc.
So if there's a recession, just get rid of the 4K option on Netflix.
Hey,
is what I'm
that's
understanding.
that's an
Hey.
option. Drop it down.
Years. I'm just saying, they said $24.99. You can drop that down for like $6.99 or something with like just watch some ads. You know what I mean? You're good job. You figured it out, Nick. You found the
Yeah,
line.
That's all
That's
there
it.
is to it.
I have a little history lesson for us, for anyone who's listening. You guys know I love history lessons and reading and etc. You know it, Nick. But anyways, so as we know, about 100 years ago, we had World War I, we had the Spanish flu, we had inflation, we had wages that weren't keeping up, we had talks about tariffs. Any of that sound familiar 100 years ago? And the same exact things have happened within the last 5 to 10 years. Well, as we know, there's the Roaring 20s. It was a really good economic period. But as we know, at the very end of the 1920s, there was the Great Depression. So we talked a lot about inflation today, but there was something that's kind of scarier than inflation, which is severe deflation, which means prices just plummet. So the reason why I was thinking of this is because we talked about whether it was the government or farmers culling chickens or culling hens over the last 3 or 4 months, because they're scared of avian flu, right? Well, I don't know if you guys knew this, but in the 1930s, and this was kind of the part of getting rid of deflation to increase prices. Think about it this way. Think how crazy this is that the government wanted prices to go up. Prices were so dirt cheap that they wanted prices to go up that in like a very short term period, they paid farmers to kill, I think it was like 3 or 6 million baby pigs, like slaughter pigs, to decrease the supply, thereby increasing the price.
What was this again?
This is in the 1930s during the Great Depression. So like we think inflation is scary, deflation is terrifying, right? That's when things go down. Not only that, but they paid farmers to spoil their potato crops, so they would have these poisonous ink bags that you would spill all over your potato crops. This is real. You can look this up. And they would have representatives actually go to the farmers and show that they did it, or else the farmers wouldn't get their payment. And they did that to decrease the supply, to increase the prices of products because deflation was so bad. So as I look at this chart of the S&P just going like this, I just think about in the 1930s when everything was going down and prices were going down. Think of how crazy it is that pork is too cheap. Like, think of having that problem. It doesn't even make sense. Like, my dinner's too cheap. Why is this a problem? That's how scary deflation is. So while we're afraid of inflation, like deflation, the more you learn about it, just drives the government crazy and they don't know what to do. So they start killing baby pigs. They start burning crops. They start inking crops. It's the craziest thing. Anyways, that's my history lesson for the day.
Crazy.
Wow, I guess you can say during, working through deflation, inflation, it's no small potatoes. All right, so
that was not a setup for a joke. That was a real story. This isn't like a Norm Macdonald joke, by the way.
So with that being said, those are our topics for today. Everybody, we do thank you for here. So before I let everyone go, Bradley or Nick, the floor is yours. Give us last words of advice for this or any other advice you may have for the week.
Nick, I'll let you go. I just talked a lot.
No, you're good. I would love to see some of this deflation stuff, but no, I would say last words of advice. I think times like now, the market's on sale. Take advantage of it. I personally bought about half of my portfolio that I had with cash. I bought some new stocks and some ETFs and stuff like that. And so, I think it's you gotta scoop stuff up while it's on sale. Take advantage of it. Maybe it goes down for a little bit longer, but I think 10 years from now, I'm gonna be happy that I was able to get some stock at a good price. So if you have the ability to do so, pick it up. It's on sale. Let's get after it.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, unless you're buying something volatile because you heard it from a friend from work, like, it's always a good time to buy, and it's always better to buy when it's cheaper. But, like, if you're waiting for a time to start investing, like, just start now. Start increasing your 401k or start maximizing your IRA. Do it now. There's no better time. Don't wait for a crash. And all that stuff you shouldn't touch until you retire. So if it keeps going down for 3 months, don't worry about it. Just put more money in if it keeps going down in 3 months. Again, as long as you're doing it in a smart way and not just putting it into GameStop or something crazy like that. Like, buy an ETF right now. ETFs follow the stock market. The stock market's a little cheap. Buy an ETF, and you're good.
Well, it's like Nick always says, you always market the time, not timing the market, right?
There you go.
Perfect. Nailed it. This is a recap with our investment draft update. Total dollars we have right now. So Nick is sitting at $97,100.24, down.
That's pretty bad, Nick. And we're done.
Yeah, that's it. And everyone, see you next week. Bradley is sitting at $96,458.57, down 3.54%. So
I'm not good at math. Who's winning with those figures?
Hey, I got you right where I want you.
I'll be right back. Okay. Hey, the worst thing that happens, gentlemen, is you get second place. You know what I mean? And always, and everyone knows I'm number one in their hearts. That's why they watch the show. So, with that being said, have a good night. Everybody have a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us again on this Friday. Have a good day.